This is the Rising Tide Startups podcast, where we chat with startup founders from all over the globe to help you escape the cubicle and begin your own startup journey. Make sure you take notes. Every episode of Rising Tide Startups is sponsored by Podbrand Media. Let Podbrand create and host your company branded podcast. Learn more at podbrandmedia.com. This is Kevin Pruitt with Rising Tide Startups. My guest today is Dexter Zhuang. Dexter, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide.
Thanks so much for having me, Kevin. Excited to be here.
I mean, I kind of feel like we've already done a podcast episode just in the pre-chat here. So, I mean, I really could have recorded all that and just, kind of turned it on and posted it online and people would have found value. But we did a little bit of pre-work, so I'm excited about, the value bombs that Dexter is going to drop. But Dexter, if you and I met at a networking event, how would you introduce yourself to me?
Ooh, okay, yeah. So I'm Dexter, founder of MoneyAbroad, an online education platform which helps high performers design their independent money path. I'm also a fractional product leader, which helps founders of scaling startups get their product teams back on track. I typically work with fintechs and SaaS companies. I'm currently based in Mexico City with my wife, but I previously lived in Singapore for 3 years. We talked a little bit about that, and lived in San Francisco for 6 years. And during that time, I worked in the tech industry for 10 years as a product leader and product manager at companies like Dropbox and a fintech unicorn in Singapore as well. Before that, I grew up in Michigan. My dad, originally moved from Shanghai, China to Canada with $300 in his pocket in 1989. My mom later joined him in Canada, and then we migrated to Michigan after I was born in Toronto, Canada. My mom actually was a restaurant owner. My dad was an IT professional. So when I was growing up, we were a hardworking, middle-class kind of immigrant household in Michigan.
So it was a typical, Chinese children. You're after school, you're working in the restaurant. On weekends, you're there. You're doing your homework on a table there. A side table there in the restaurant. So it's
I've definitely done my homework in the restaurant. And funny enough, my aspiration in high school was like, hey, Mom, can I be a waiter in your restaurant? And my mom actually refused. She was like, I don't think you're good enough to be a waiter in this
Oh no,
restaurant.
You got busted by mom.
Yeah. So she was like, but you could be a busboy if you want. I was like, oh, that doesn't sound as fun as being a waiter, like actually interacting with customers. So I actually declined that job offer. My first job offer declined.
Yeah, say, Mom, I'm going to have to go with plan B and go start a unicorn in Singapore. So, I think you probably made the right choice. But that is awesome. One thing he neglected to mention is, along that path was a graduation from an Ivy League school. And so, Dexter, talk about just your time as a project manager or product manager, and maybe how that prepared you for kind of launching out on your own.
Definitely. So when I was in the tech industry, I was a product manager and product leader at both public companies like the Dropboxes, and I was able to join Dropbox at an amazing time when it was before the IPO and we were able to scale a team. My team was this team called Growth Product. And we scaled that team from about 6 people to over 60 by the time we left, all the way until IPO. And I also worked at startups. So I worked at smaller startups. One ended up becoming a fintech unicorn. While I was there, I was on their journey from about 200 employees to over 800 employees by the time I left. Wow. And so my experiences from that industry were really helpful for me to, one, build some important skills. I think the tech industry is really great about helping you develop skills where you can actually go and take that and apply that to your business in the future. especially if you're running like an online business of some kinds, it really helps to have built, some internet kind of products
Right.
before. And the other thing it did for me was it helped me build some financial security. I think, growing up in an immigrant kind of household, I think finances was also always top of mind for me. And I needed that kind of financial security in my 20s to feel more confident in stepping away and building something of my own in my early 30s. And the last thing I would say is confidence. I think a lot of people, before they start something, they have fear, right? And I
Hmm.
definitely felt that same fear. And what really helped me was building some experiences, some network that gave me more confidence that, okay, I can do this, and also seeing enough people doing it that it made me feel like, uh, okay, I can be like them. Like if they can do it, why not
Yeah.
me, right?
I mean, I love that, and just that is so applicable across so many, industries and verticals. Is the idea that look around, you know, are there are people that look like you, that act like you, that are in this your same stage of life, that are doing it, somehow they're figuring it out. So, that
Exactly.
does instill, confidence in you that, hey, I think I can do this too, and I maybe I can even piggyback on some of the, the lessons that they've learned, maybe the hard way, that I can kind of, just listen to and take on board without having to repeat those same mistakes. But it is interesting how many
Exactly.
people I've interviewed on this podcast that have some sort of product management background, because
Oh,
that
interesting.
is so entrepreneurial, to a company. It's
Yes,
like you have your own little startup inside a bigger structure. So, stepping into startup land is almost like second nature, if you kind of created the whole product cycle, that you're trying to create something at MVP, get it started, feedback, iterate, launch, scale within with the confines of a larger structure. But it is
exactly.
an
Yeah.
interesting journey to see. But I'm interested in, like, your transition, like what causes somebody to go from working for this fintech unicorn to say, what, I think I'm just going to step out on my own, or what was that journey?
That's a good question. And to answer that, I have to go back a little bit further. So in college, that was when I moved to San Francisco for my first time for a internship. I worked at a now a public company. It's Udemy, and I was an intern there when it was only 40 people. And when I started college, I actually wanted to go into government. So it sounds really weird. Uh, I'll try to explain briefly. But going into college, my aspiration was, okay, I want to, make some kind of difference. I want to make some kind of impact. Like, hey, I'm at this, great Ivy League school. Like, I should be using that,
Yeah.
kind of resource. So why not try to get a law degree or something and then go into government, maybe work for the State Department. In high school, I actually not intern, but I attended a summer camp that was sponsored by the State Department. So I had a little bit of
Hmm.
exposure there. And after a couple of years of college, I realized, okay, a lot of the work that kind of happens in government and, this kind of social kind of sectors, they tend to be not as like action oriented as I
Hmm.
wanted my work to be, and I wanted to build something. So I saw actually met some other entrepreneurs, several of which had spent time in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and I saw what they were building were like really cool kind of companies or services, products. I was like, oh, I want to do that instead. I think that feels like a better kind of journey, and it sounds more exciting, and I get to build something, and it might make a difference,
Yeah, it has
for
impact. Yeah.
customers, impact. So yeah, to go back to your question, like why did I make that leap? I think that seeds were planted, in college when I moved to San Francisco and I saw like, a lot of people building stuff, and I saw myself doing the same thing at some point on my journey. It just took me 10 plus years to, gain the financial security or, the confidence and skills that we talked about.
Well, I think there's wisdom in, so many people talk about, they start this side gig and then, it's kind of like this inverted chart. You got the side gigs kind of growing and you're like maybe peeling back a little bit on your day job. And, the whole idea that when these cross, that's like the magic, that's like the golden zone, the golden hour for photography. That's the time where you say, okay, now I think this is going to work. And now I can just kind of, put some fuel to it and scale it a little bit. But
Well, I
it
think it's
is
interesting
it's a
because, yeah, some
journey.
people can start in their early 20s. They have that confidence, or, they have that, maybe not the skill set at that point, but, they have a certain level of belief that they can do it. And
Yeah.
they maybe have some finances, or some savings by that point to help them as well. Or they just don't care about that. I've also met, younger entrepreneurs who don't mind it, and that doesn't really psychologically make a difference for them. So there's definitely that camp of, people as well who build side hustles or are entrepreneurs at an early age. For me, I just took longer,
Yeah.
but I
You didn't want
feel
to live in a
that,
van.
yeah, exactly. I feel like it's another journey, and maybe less talked about is like the people who are not the people you see like on media, like the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world,
Yeah.
who, you know, uh, drop out of school and go do something crazy, build some billion-dollar company. And in college, there's plenty of entrepreneurs that I'm meeting now who are starting things in their 30s. And
Hmm.
I
Or
think it's a
later.
great
Yeah.
path as well. Yeah.
It is it's interesting. I just the whole idea of like, how many guests we've had on here that there's a difference between a truly like a serial entrepreneur and somebody that or a true entrepreneur and just somebody that is starting a business or somebody that owns a business or runs a business or whatever. And I have a theory that there's almost like there's a genetic disposition, for somebody to want to, be crazy enough to start something from scratch. And I'd be curious to know what your take is on that. I think that a lot of times people we interview that have created startups, they can go back. Yeah, I sold candy when I was in school on the playground. I schlepped baseball cards. I had my first job at 16, and then I was buying stuff and at garage sales and swapping it on, Facebook Marketplace or whatever that is. So, what do you think? Is there sometimes a genetic or often a genetic disposition toward entrepreneurship?
I can see what you mean, because as you're giving these examples, that actually sounds like my wife. She, in high school flipped sneakers, and, she later started a successful business in university as well. And I think that, you know, idea of an entrepreneurial gene seems to apply very well in her case. For me, it's definitely, I think, less of the case. I mean, I definitely built projects, or I built services
Uh-huh.
in high school. I didn't flip any shoes. I wasn't super commercially oriented, but I did take a lot of initiative. I think my view on this is that it's so important to have exposure.
Hmm.
And
Good word.
when I think about this in the context of me and my wife, I had exposure to my mom, who started her own restaurant. I think that gave me some exposure to at least, SMB entrepreneurship,
Hmm.
but I didn't have as much exposure to, other types of entrepreneurs. My wife, she grew up with her parents also being artists and then starting like art stores in Sydney, Australia, and that gave her some exposure to also entrepreneurship
Mhm.
from an early age. So my direction that I'm leaning towards is I think entrepreneurship or the ability to kind of get started early for people seems to be heavily influenced by that exposure, especially if they have examples of that in their family.
Yeah.
It can really help accelerate, how quickly it is for you to get started.
If that leads to inspiration, because you can be I mean, like
Yeah,
I think it's things I was exposed to as a child, that like, maybe my parents did or whatever. I'm thinking I wouldn't want to do that job for anything in the world. If you had a bad experience in the Chinese restaurant, that would be negative exposure,
it's true.
to
It's
what you're
true.
headed to. But and I think there's a lot of connection too between the like creatives and entrepreneurs. I mean, they're unique, kind
Mm.
of almost like, I have to live in my left brain, but there's a right brain element that is alive and kicking somewhere. But I really want to kind of dive into, your company that you started. And so often, companies that our guests start are out of a need they had personally. Like I was trying to figure something out personally, maybe in another context, and then it just kind of took on a life of its own and became the company or became the product that solved the problem. So I'm not trying to lead the witness, counselor, but you tell me, the story about Money Abroad.
No, that's definitely the case for me. I was trying to solve a problem that I had. So after 2018, I left San Francisco. I spent some time doing a travel sabbatical in Europe, South America, Asia. And then in 2020, I moved to Singapore. So for the past 5 years, I've been abroad as an American expat. And my inspiration for starting Money Abroad came from that set of experiences because I realized personal finance and money was so complicated after I had left the US. And so in early 2023, I had left my full-time product job at the fintech unicorn. And I started Money Abroad as a newsletter, first about money on expats. And I wanted to just talk about my lessons learned from that journey and share stories and case studies from other professionals who had been on that similar journey. Over time, that evolved into an online education business to help high performing professionals design their independent money path because a lot of the conversations I was having with people like me was about how they were chasing, some kind of default path, like, okay, I gotta work until, 65 and then
Hmm.
retire, or I want to uh, pursue early retirement, which is like part of the FIRE
Yeah,
movement,
the fire movement.
or I
Yeah.
want to win the startup lottery. I want to like work at a, small startup and have it become a unicorn and, make a ton of money and then retire. And those were kind of the default paths that are
Mhm.
in media on how you can achieve financial independence. But what I discovered is that these are not the only options. So through our courses and content, we focus on teaching people what those options are and how to execute them. Our flagship course right now is called Remote Side Hustle Launchpad, and that's focused on exactly this idea. Helps busy professionals unlock a new income stream by launching a service-based side hustle. And this is because, in my own experience, I earned over $100,000 from my side hustles taking 2 hours a day. I did side hustles on things like career coaching.
Hmm.
I started a e-commerce back in San Francisco. I did product consulting. I did affiliate marketing. And along the journey, I think working at startups definitely helped me build some skills that I'm
Yeah,
using
for sure.
today on the entrepreneurial journey. But those side hustles actually helped a lot as well.
Hmm.
And they helped me fill in the gaps of a lot of things I wouldn't have been able to experience in startups.
When you
So,
talk about, let me ask you a
yeah.
question real quick. When you talk about money, money has so many different facets to it. I mean, I'm thinking about when we lived abroad, the idea that, we had questions about how do what's the tax consequence of living abroad? What's the how do you transfer money, in the most efficient, effective, and safe manner? How do you deal with the conversion rate? I mean, there were so many questions about, operating in multiple currencies and operating in, outside of the contiguous 48 states, whatever. But you're talking more about how to make money, not necessarily how you handle it, or is there are those elements there as well around the taxation and around managing and bookkeeping and, the whole, I mean, is it a full service like package?
The main online education kind of program focuses on how to earn more because that's the biggest challenge that after growing the newsletter, we grew to over 6,000 subscribers. And the biggest challenge that resonated with people was, okay, how can I earn more and how can
Hmm.
I do so in a way that takes control of my time?
Yeah. If you don't earn
So
money, you don't
that's
have those other problems. That's right.
yeah. Yes, and also there's pretty good kind of kind of also strategies around okay, generally the people that I've observed, achieve financial independence or are on that path, they do it by either earning a lot and then investing a lot of it
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
thinking more long term about those investments. And that's one tried and true path that is accessible for a lot of people. And the other kind of challenges that you mentioned, things like taxes, managing finances, those are definitely topics that are important and top of mind as well. And I've shared lessons and case studies
Hmm.
around those topics in the newsletter as well. Those are not a part of the course, not a focus there, because like you said, it would
Maybe
be too
not yet.
broad.
Maybe 2.0. You never know. That's right.
Yes, but I listen to the students and the readers and their challenges, and if in the future those become really big challenges
Yeah.
for many
Prevalent.
people,
Yep.
then I would respond to that.
I love it. And that right there is, you just don't miss what he just said. That is a really a gold nugget. Said I listen to the people that are in my community. I listen to the problems they're having. I'd make note of that, and when there's a critical mass, we respond to it. Type thing. So that we could hit stop right now, and that would have been worth the time we took today. But I'm curious, just some of the lessons that you've learned, since you started this, and I mean, has it just been a continuous, hockey stick up and to the right, or have you had, kind of a roller coaster ride a little bit as you got started?
It's definitely a roller coaster ride. I think uh, when I look in the media and I see stories of, hockey stick growth and rocket ship kind of growth, and I've been in those companies where, there is that media story, it's always messier on the inside, right?
Yeah,
And
good word.
especially when you're starting your own thing and you're there from the beginning, it's very messy. So definitely a roller coaster ride, but definitely very worthwhile as well. I think in the beginning, my biggest challenge when I was working on the newsletter and growing the newsletter was deciding, okay, what are people actually, struggling with? Like
Hmm.
what are because I was taking a different approach, right? Here I was with a product kind of background, but I was actually taking a bit more of a marketing kind of esque approach. Okay,
Hmm.
first build a list and first, build content that resonates with the people on your
Yep.
list. And then you start asking questions about, okay, what kind of services and products do
Hmm.
you need? So that's the approach that I took on my journey, which is a bit different than, some other founders that I know. So that was the biggest challenge in the beginning, was identifying, okay, what were those content topics? What were the right hypotheses, to test out? I've
Hmm.
really viewed this as a experimental kind of approach.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah,
certainly, and that goes back to even your product manager days.
it's true, true. Yeah, I definitely applied that from the product management world.
Nothing is
Yes,
wasted. As you kind of stepped out, is this your main gig right now? Is this the thing that is virtually taking, nearly 100% of your time, at least in the workspace?
that's a good question. Yeah, right now, I would say it's taking the majority of my time. So it's taking, somewhere around like two-thirds of my time.
Hmm.
And then the other one-third of my time, I'm working in consulting or advisory kind of basis with some tech startup clients. And my reason for doing this, from the beginning in early 2023, when I left my full-time role, I started taking on, just a handful of clients, very small number,
Hmm.
as a way to extend my financial runway. Because
Hmm.
I'm the kind of person who, if I can have that extension of the runway, then I don't have to mentally think about it very much.
Yeah, that's why
And that
there's
really
wisdom.
helped give me more freedom to then work on Money Abroad and build that into what it is today. And I think of what a lot of people don't realize is how long it can take for
Mm.
you to build your channel and build your products and services to the point where that's going to be financially sustainable for you.
And now here's a quick word from one of our new sponsors on Rising Tide Startups. At Navicus, we know you spend far too much time on administrative tasks. Let us take those off your plate so you can focus on the highest value activities in your business. We have highly trained, highly vetted specialists ready to take on those administrative responsibilities at an affordable and effective rate. Check us out at navicus.com, proud sponsor of Rising Tide Startups podcast. I uh I have another theory that I just, none of this is original. This is all like just listening to guests and listening to their stories and even some of my own, startup failures and success. But the idea that, entrepreneurs need two things to succeed. They need the reward of success and they need the fear of failure. You know,
Mm,
you have to have that two-legged, market or whatever, or forces, those two forces that are kind of at work. And as I listened to you, said I wanted that long runway or whatever. I think in my case, if I had too much of a runway, or if it was too soft of a landing, or too much of a safety net, golden parachute or whatever, I think it would probably demotivate me a little bit. I wouldn't be quite as
mm,
hungry. I wouldn't be quite as aggressive. I just like nervously focused, on that. I think I could see a lot of shiny objects, and a lot of squirrels, that are
totally.
running by. How do you balance that as because I obviously you have an internal driver that is kind of a regulator, in you, but how do you balance that as an entrepreneur so you don't over rely on that runway?
Absolutely. I think that's a great point because um, I think it depends on your personality and your ability to manage a few different things, or where you feel motivated by, right? I think you really hit the nail on its head on motivation. I think that's super important for people to recognize in themselves what's
Hmm,
driving them,
good
to
word.
start this entrepreneurial journey in the first place, and what's going to help them sustain their motivation. And for me, what helped me balance is knowing that, okay, for me, I want the main focus to be the main focus.
Hmm.
So I don't want that to be a secondary focus. So since the beginning, Money Abroad has always been the main focus. And because of that, then I can partition my time so I can actually go to my calendar, for example, and say, okay, is my main focus the main focus this week, or am I, chasing like shiny objects, or do I have too many
Hmm.
clients? Am I doing too many other things on my calendar that are not my main focus? So I try to do that calendar audit method where
Hmm.
I look at my schedule and then block out certain times
Yeah.
for money abroad and then block out certain times for clients. And then I try to time box it to say, okay, this is my capacity for, the consulting and advising. This is my capacity for money abroad. And that's helped me really, really manage that balance.
Hmm. I love the way you kind of talked about how do you take that internal inventory, to see, what motivates you, what is that, what's your level of motivation, self-motivation without having external, forces at play. But as you
Totally.
look
And
back
that
at,
can change over time as well. So I
oh,
want
for
to
sure, for sure.
also, um, you know, show people like as part of their journey, there's a distribution of time on my calendar, and that has, shifted over time,
Hmm.
and become more and more money broad over time. And as long as I'm trending in the right direction, then I feel happy with that.
Yeah, no, that's a good. I'm glad you followed up with that, because that, I guess, an important factor, in this whole
Absolutely. Yeah. If
inventory.
it was
And
like trending in the other direction,
yeah,
then
that's
I'd be
right.
concerned. I'd be like,
Time to
okay, is
do a little
this,
checkup here.
yeah, is this really what I want?
Yeah,
Am I trying to become a full-time consultant?
right.
And I would have to ask myself those kind of questions.
You're just building another job if you do that. You're just you're creating another job for yourself.
Exactly.
So, as you look back at kind of starting out, stepping out on your own and kind of trying to build, money abroad, what are one or two just really key lessons that you've learned that you think would be, maybe industry agnostic, product agnostic, but just that you could share with our audience that just says, okay, as you are stepping out, and you mentioned so many things already, but do one or two things that you might not have touched on stand out, just really short, concise kind of bullet points, and say, this would really help you, I think, as take this leap.
I'd say one, experiment quickly, validate your ideas
Mhm.
as fast as you can. For example, when I launched my tea e-commerce, I spent so much time iterating the design of the products, you know, how the website looked like, all these things. Took me 6 months to launch it. And then it didn't work out. So it felt like I could have done that a lot shorter. Whereas for this remote side hustle launchpad course, I already had a newsletter and I already had an audience, and I validated, whether people wanted to join the beta program by putting down money for it
Hmm.
in the first 48 hours.
Yep.
So by validating so quickly, I was able to, decide, okay, yes, I'm going to invest my time into this, or no, I'm not.
What else was another thing that would come to mind, that just as a like a second point of, just something to remember?
Absolutely. So this is for me personally. Like if I could go back and tell my 21, 22-year-old self, uh, having just graduated from college, moved to San Francisco to work at these startups, I would have told myself, you are already very capable and you
Mm.
already have what you need to get started and taking action. So you can, uh, take action now to test ideas so that you can discover like what you're good at. Because I think it was a journey for me over, maybe half of my 20s, well into my late 20s, to identify, okay, what are my strengths? Like, what am I really good at in a professional context,
Yeah.
and even non-professional too, that I can leverage in my business. And if I could go back and tell my 22-year-old self to do something and be, try to accelerate, how quickly you are to identify your strengths by just testing a lot of things, go broad first to try out tons of different activities or different skills so that you can validate like, okay, I'm good at these things. And then, then have a hypothesis for what kind of side hustle you want to start or business you want to start, and then just start validating that. That leverages your strengths, right? I think it's super important to leverage what you're good at.
It's like fail forward or fail fast and fail forward. It's the whole idea to say, try a lot of things, because that's probably when you have the least risk. Early on in life, you're go for it. Try a lot of things and see what's going to work, and learn about yourself, learn, what you're good at, what you like to do type thing. But what a great journey you've been on, and are just really, and in some ways just getting started in this, kind of phase 2 here. So Dexter, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. And man, as we wrap up today, just tell people, like, where can they find you online? Where can they find out about Money Abroad?
Totally. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on, Kevin. And in terms of place to find me online, you can find me on moneyabroad.co. That's my website. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn and also X as well. So those are different places you can find me.
So remember that moneyabroad.co, not .com, because I'm sure the .com was gone 30 years ago, probably, or it cost $500,000 to buy. So it is a good place. He's responsive on LinkedIn. I mean, I reached out to him and he immediately connected with me on LinkedIn. So it's good. It's been really a pleasure to have you on. I appreciate you just sharing your wisdom, your insights, and your story, and really just playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Dexter, have a great weekend.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Yeah, loved this conversation, and excited, for more people to start startups as a result of this.
I hope you heard some great takeaways from our guests today. Make sure you reach out to them, and thank you again for playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide.